paper if necessary, but don't be overly reliant on the technology. Now, there are some panels that will be inherently. If you are doing something that shows video, and that's an inherent part of the panel, there's nothing you can do about it. But be prepared to wing it if that fails. So always have an alternative. I'm gonna walk around a little bit. I don't like sitting for whole things unless I'm sitting on a tabletop, primarily because I think it's boring looking. It's not really, it doesn't give you that personal feel. It's just, I have bad feet and bad hands, so I have to move around. So that's kind of the big thing. And when you do have panels that have slideshows, things on a screen, has anybody ever been to a work presentation where all they did was, and be sure to go to the lounge. So everybody knows where the lounge is. Be sure to go to the lounge. Next slide. And be on time. Next slide. All they did was read it, and they didn't talk about it at all. When you go to a presentation like that, why did you bother holding it? Why don't you just offer to send people the presentation on PowerPoint by email and you're done, or give them a link that they can go to? Be prepared to talk. You can have slides, but use them as a guide. Don't rely on them as every bit of text that you're going to use. Because at that point you become a robot, an automaton. And that's not effective at all. People fall asleep during these. Anybody fallen asleep or felt like you're gonna fall asleep at work because of these things? Yep, me too. And I will not up. There we go, I can snap. Not off like that. It doesn't work. So again, be prepared to talk to people. Yes? Did you have a question?
No.
Okay, that's fine. I just thought you were like, yeah, I want to ask you a question. All right, so those are things about like time management and technology. Now what I want to mention is giving your information effectively. And that's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks that a lot of people have. I have something to say, I don't know exactly how to say it so that people can relate to it or get something out of it. One of the things that I always recommend, work from an outline. Have your talking points already written out. When you think about what you're going to say, and use things that you're comfortable with. If you have to give a presentation on interspatial mechanics for a rocket, you better know what those things are. You've got to be able to talk about them and not just say, well, the XB9 has a coefficient of this and it's going to be aerodynamically inefficient at speeds of. You don't want to go that route. You want to be able to talk about something in a way that people can relate to. Know your audience. And work from something that's already pre-scripted. That will come across. Even though if I'm referencing things, I actually know what I'm talking about, and I just need to look at it as a reference, not as I have to read it off the page. The other thing that I would always recommend, and this works for me, it doesn't work for everybody, but keep your high-level topics as bullet points. So have like 4 major talking points, keep those as your high level, and then delve deeper into the subject matter later. That way, you can keep it fluid, and if you know that something is trying to bore your audience, you can move on. You're not completely stuck on, well, I gotta get through this before I get to this. The other thing that I think is important, when you're doing a panel like this, does anybody know what a SME is? An SME? Subject matter expert. When you're hosting something like this, the expectation is that you're the SME. You're a subject matter expert. Don't be reliant on everybody else in the audience feeding you data to make it effective. You need to be able to talk to those points. Now you can ask for something interactive from the audience, as I've been doing periodically. I see people that seem to look like they have a question. You can ask for input and add to what you're gonna say, but don't be reliant on them to provide the information. And believe it or not, there are panelists that do this. And it doesn't look good when it happens. It actually makes them look silly. So you want to make sure that you're doing stuff like that. The other thing is when you're a SME, don't talk with jargon, slang, in-house jokes, lingo. Talk in terms that people can understand. And I know I've said that before, but when you start using technical terms, or you start using things that only one community understands and there's people from multiple communities available, you lose your effectiveness. They get lost. And what typically happens when people get lost, they start walking out the door. And you don't want that when you're a panelist.
Because you're the expert, they are not the expert.
Right. You're the expert, you're giving stuff to them. Why should they have to go to college to learn all these terms so that you can tell them something? If they went to college to learn it, they probably wouldn't be here. Yes?
I'm actually wondering, does it help if it's like you do use the jargons, but you intentionally use it as like a teaching, like this word means this abbreviation means that, and that's how you get people up to speed, like something like that?
You can. There are ways that you can do that effectively, and it's a great question. Let me give you an example. If I was up here and I just brought up the term FPS, Foxtrot, Papa, Sierra, what am I talking about?
I don't know.
Frames per second.
Frames per second?
Frames per second.
First-person shooter.
First-person shooter. Nope, I'm actually a member of the Fun Day Paw Pet Show. But I've referenced a term that multiple people in this community may have different perspectives on. The best way to introduce jargon, lingo, or acronyms is to actually say what it is and then say better known as. So if I had said, hey everybody, I'm a puppeteer on the Fun Day Paw Pet Show, you might hear it called FPS. For the rest of this talk, every time I say FPS, you already know what I'm talking about. But if I just throw that term out there, you'd be like, why is he talking about how many frames per second on something where there's no video? You know? So you want to keep it simple and you want to keep it fluid and fluent. Yeah?
For me, when I do presentations, if I'm having to teach something that people want to learn, don't, expect that they can learn it diffusing through the whole presentation. Don't assume like, oh, I said it, they learned it, and they can build upon that. Don't assume that. They're going to be struggling with terminology, what's going on.
Yep.
Do the overview topics. Don't do a deep dive. It's not a college lecture.
Right. So refresh. Constantly refresh that information. Something else that you can do when you start using jargon or when you start having to bring in examples to support what you're talking about, keep your examples relatable. Keep them simple and straightforward, but use examples that people can understand. Another reference from the same topic, Fun Day Paw Pet Show. It's a puppet show. If I start talking about puppeteering terms, a lot of people may not understand the technical aspect of it. But if I start talking about Sesame Street and the Muppets, how many people know what those are? We've built a connection on a similar interest, a common interest. That relatability, that reference point, helps keep your presentations more relatable. People understand it, digest it, and retain it a lot easier. So, like I said, if you're going to use examples, use things that people can relate to. One of the things that I always talk about when people ask me, well, what's furry? What is all this? And these are people that are not part of the community. If I say, we're interested in anthropomorphic characters, everybody's like, huh? Some people are, oh, I saw that Zootopia trailer that used the word anthropomorphic. I think I understand. But if I tell you, well, that's a $5 term for a nickel concept. It's walking, talking cartoon animals. Think Scooby-Doo, Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse, Tony the Tiger. It's much more relatable, names and characters people have seen, and then you say, yeah, because they're animals, but they walk like people. They wear clothing, they can talk. Animals don't really do that most of the time. Some people dress up their cats in cute sweaters, but most of the time they don't wear clothes and stuff. They don't talk. And if you see a dog walking on its hind legs, it's really adorable or really disturbing. But you want to make sure that they understand your references and your examples. So try to use common terms when you do that in any presentation. Believe it or not, we're halfway through my list. Then we can have more of a discussion. So, some people ask, well, how do I put this together? How do I figure out if I'm going to talk for 20 minutes? How am I going to talk and not talk for, or how am I going to do for 40 minutes, not 20 minutes or 90 minutes? So putting everything together and getting your prep done. First thing I would recommend is, after you've created your outline, actually practice your presentation. Maybe in front of a mirror, maybe in front of a camera or a tape recorder. But practice it and then review it. See how it sounds. You'll find that not only do you normally sound different than you think you sound, most people don't listen to themselves talk, so you don't really know what your vocal tone is. You don't recognize or realize what your pacing is. And some people really talk fast like the Micro Machines person. And they're talking like this all the time. And I'm gonna get all the information in because I know I've only got 45 minutes to talk about it, but I've got 25 pages I've got to review. So I'm gonna talk as fast as I can. They sound like a cartoon character that you wanna laugh at rather than get information from.
And no one gets it either.
And no one gets it. Then, there are some people who talk like this. And not only does it waste time, but people will be either laughing at you or not listening to you and getting ready to leave because they just don't get what you're trying to say. What you're saying, the cadences, the pauses, the presentation itself doesn't work. It doesn't sound conversational. So practice what you're gonna say and practice it at the tone that you wanna use. Also, there's a really old adage. People will strain to ignore a scream. No, people will try hard to ignore a scream, but strain to hear a whisper. How many people have actually heard people whispering and you, or talking soft, and there's something you really want to hear, and you know you shouldn't listen, but it's like E.F. Hutton says, and if anybody gets that reference, it's old. But people will try to listen to things that are spoken very softly. They will actively try to ignore screaming babies, or people, they walk by people that are yelling and screaming in a supermarket. It's human nature. So sometimes it's much more effective once you've made a point, bring your tone down a level. Make it calm and quiet and sound confident. That's a really effective way to get people's attention and then let them retain the information. Really pay attention to what you're saying. Yes, sir.
Hi, could you elaborate on what you meant by practice, or maybe you can share like what you do to practice
Sure.
topics or discussions like this?
Absolutely. So when I put this outline together, and again, this is a one-page outline of this entire presentation, it has every single bullet point that I'm going to talk about. I will actually think about what I'm going to say, come up with any stories or ideas or examples that I'm going to use. I'll write it down on index cards. Then when I'm getting ready to practice, take my cell phone, there's a timer on it, there's a stopwatch function. I start the stopwatch and I start speaking how I think I'm gonna speak with all the pauses, cadences, everything for effect. When I'm done with that card, turn it off. I then look at how much time I've spent. I write that down on the back of that card. Then I do another card, same thing, then do another card. I add up the amount of time that I used to spend on those things to figure out how my panel or presentation or my speech, because I actually do this for comedy routines as well. How much time did I spend and how much time do I have available? What do I have to take out to make it fit in the allotted time? Or do I have time to add something else? That works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. But the index card method that I use really helps me keep topics together, and it also helps me realize just how much time I'm spending on each topic. Does that kind of answer the question?
Great, thank you.
Okay, so that's one of the things that I do. Communicating in that conversational pace and tone is the other thing. Don't feel like you got to scream. We're not Andrew Dice Clay. We don't have to be yelling, screaming, and hollering. If anybody knows who that is, again, reference that might be a comedian that's a little older.
Alkali.
Huh?
Alkali.
Yeah, alkali. You don't have to be alkali all the time. But when you want to be really effective, you want people to feel like they can relate to you. And not everybody likes being yelled at and screamed at. For some people it's funny, but not everybody. So, so far I haven't seen anybody want to walk out of this room. So hopefully I'm holding your attention a little bit. One other thing, and I've already been guilty of this several times, but there is a game that I learned when I was in speech class. It's called the game. How many people know what it is? A few people. The game is a technique used to help you prevent from using filler words. Filler words are things like like, and all kinds of weird sounds that aren't part of a normal conversation. And I'm gonna give you guys an example. I'm gonna let you put me on the spot. So Fuma, you can't do this because I know Fuma, and I know things that he will suggest. I'm gonna pick a random person from the audience. I want all of you right now to think of a topic. The most random topic that you think I know nothing about or very little about. So think about something real quick. Use certain vest with the tiger shirt, the tiger tail. Give me a topic to talk about. I have to talk for 30 seconds and not use stutter words or filler words.
Molten salt reactors.
What is it?
Molten salt reactors.
Molten salt reactors. All right. Does anybody have a stopwatch? Okay. I want you to put on a stopwatch. When you say go, I want you to time it and just raise your hand when I've reached 30 seconds. Okay? There are a lot of scientists that know things about molten salt reactors. I don't know diddly about molten salt reactors. However, here's a few things I can tell you. One, I know that if I went near a molten salt reactor, I'd be scared out of my mind. Second thing I want you to know is I don't know a lot about science, but I know one other thing. Molten salt reactors do not necessarily produce the stuff that I put on my salad. And that's more important to me than molten salt reactors. I can also tell you one other thing. Stop. How many times did I say like, or any other filler word? 0. Using this technique may not get you the most effective material to talk about, but it does give you the ability to start thinking outside the box so you're focused on what you're saying and not feel like you're stuttering. Have you ever watched a politician on television or any other person who's having to do an interview? And you can tell when they're getting uncomfortable because they start saying, I'm not sure exactly where to answer that, but I'm going to have to get back to you. When they stretch those words out or they start filling with stutter words, they don't sound like they know what they're talking about. That's a big part of the confidence aspect of things. There's another technique that you can use when you're speaking. This works at any point in time. Doesn't matter if you're doing a presentation, if you're giving a lecture, or if you're just talking with your friends. Before you start speaking, take a short breath. Most people don't think about this. That 1/2 second that it took for you to take that breath gives you just enough time to formulate the beginning of a sentence in your mind. That is a normal human reaction, and it works for 98% of the population. You will not sound like you don't know what you're talking about because your mind has already started creating the sentence, even if it's only subconsciously. So the next time you're talking with people, I would encourage you, if somebody asks you a question, well, let me think about that for a second. Take that breath and see what happens when you start speaking. You will find most of the time you don't say That's the game. It may not, like I say, it may not give you information and it may not make you know more, but it does help you figure out how to make your conversation flow better. And it does seem effective. So, something you can always practice. If you want to practice this afterwards, we can. Sometimes it can be really fun. I've done it with cartoon character names all the time and people love it. Yes, sir. Or ma'am, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I lost my train of thought now. Thank you.
Hold on, wait a minute. Choo, 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 choo. The train's coming back.
No,
We were talking about the game.
Yes. So when people say I don't know or I'll have to get back to you on that, some people have told me that makes me sound like unprofessional. But I think I'd like your opinion on whether you think that's better for me to be genuine or find, I don't know what I'd rather do, like make something up or.
No. If you want to be effective and you want people to have confidence in what you say, worst thing you can do is lie. Absolutely worst thing you can do is lie. You want to be honest and genuine because people will catch you on it and they will hold you to it. And that will undermine your credibility long term. What you can do is instead of pivoting, go ahead and tell them, you know, I actually don't have the answer to that question. Let me find out and I'll get back to you. What you're saying is, I genuinely don't know, and I don't want to give you bad information. Let me find out for that, and however I need to reach out to you, I will do that. I don't know if that undermines credibility with some people, but for me, when I get that to people, they usually just say, okay, when will you get back to me? It actually does build confidence because you're not going to blow smoke over it. Yes?
Just to emphasize the way that you said, I don't have the answer to the question, so I can get back to you on that, versus the way that you sort of truncated it and said, I'm not sure, but I have to get back to you. The message is the same, but the delivery is extremely different. And that's the difference between one interpretation versus the other.
And one other thing that's really important, and this is the next talking point, but it flows right into what you were saying. There's a wide variety, there's a chasm between having someone say, I'm not really sure, let me get back to you, and just throwing so much data at people that they look like a deer in the headlights. It's really ineffective when you have to talk to people and all you're doing is throwing them numbers and information, and it's nonstop. And then after a while, they're just like, wait a minute, did you talk about this already? Can you go back over this? And you start repeating over and over and over again, lots and lots of data. Don't overwhelm your audience with things. You want to keep those really important talking points as the focal points, those high bullet points. Make sure things relate back to that point and bring the bridges back to them. You can also do something, I don't know if you've noticed, but there are things that I tend to do. I use hand gestures a lot. Reason is, I'm a fursuiter. I'm very accustomed to pantomiming when I need to talk because my character does not speak. But there are different body positions that I tend to use. One is hand in the pocket, palm up. Sometimes I gesture like this. Sometimes I point. Sometimes I put my hand on my chin. I never try to talk with my hands behind my back. Body posture, body motion. This tells you I'm not really sure what I'm about to say. This tells you, well, I've got something to say and I don't know if you're gonna like it. This tells you I'm talking to you friend to friend. I know what I'm talking about. I'm just gonna give you some stuff and I'm gonna have a conversation with you. The problem with doing this, and I will be very blunt, you become very self-conscious in the beginning about what am I doing with my hands. Try not to think about it too much. Just let the gestures be natural. The more natural you are with your body positioning, your posture, and the way that you talk, the easier it is for people to be easy about you, to be easy around you and feel comfortable with what you're saying. That is a skill that takes a while to develop. I'm not gonna lie, it does take a while for that to happen. But when it does, you'll realize it's natural. You just do it all the time, no matter whether you're thinking about it or not. You've just now been made aware of it. Okay? I think we're almost done with the talking points, and I am at about 30 minutes of time. Remember we were talking about how to make things short?
26 minutes.
Yeah. So let me go over a couple more points. We only have 2. And then we'll start having some questions. Yes?
You mentioned practicing in front of a mirror to attempt to improve the style of talking.
Yeah.
Is it possible to attempt to integrate some of these methods into daily life to make it a subconscious thing where instead of actively thinking about what you're saying, it's possible to just say it?
It absolutely is. It's a great question and a great point. The more you start practicing how you speak and enunciating and cadences, the more you repeat it. It's a learned skill. I would equate it to handwriting. When you're first learned to write as a child, your letters are shaky. They don't always look right. Some people have problems with them. If you practice them, you learn print and manuscript easier. Some people learn cursive after that. Not going to say that that's necessary. I'm a calligrapher, so it was necessary for me. But learning how to write makes your handwriting clearer and more stylistic. The same is true of everything you do. So if you're practicing how to speak, things do become more natural and you repeat things over and over and over again. You'll see it over and over again. Yeah.
A lot of it is actually being able to ask a decent question. Not here, but like if in real life you're going to ask, how do I go about doing this thing and describing your issue? That helps you describe how to get that out there, what you want to get back from the owner. And you'll get that information a little bit better than you ever did whenever you're the one teaching the topic to someone else.
So again, trying not to make this boring. Want to keep it a little energetic, because I can actually tell a couple of people here are kind of tired. And I'll be honest, I'm tired too. The last few days I've been waking up at 5:30 in the morning to be at radio TV stations at 8. And And by the afternoon, I need a nap. There's only a couple more things. One of the other things that's really very easy to do, it's much easier than you think, is when you use examples, emphasize the positive, not the negative. When you use a negative example, you've already put something bad into somebody's mind. And I've used this example in my media presentation. If I was going to tell people that I ride motorcycles, and I don't, but if I was going to tell people that I ride motorcycles, what would you think if I said, well, I'm not like those Hells Angels. I don't go around damaging property. I don't go around causing a lot of problems. I don't have to run from the police, and I sure as heck don't steal stuff. What images have I put in your head about my motorcyclist right now? Every single one of those things has now been tied subconsciously to what you're about to say. However, if I were to say, I really love riding motorcycles. There's a freedom aspect that I can't really relate to anything else. I love the feeling of the hair in my wind. I love the power of just being on the open road and going down there by myself. There's an independence that I feel. What kinds of images have I put in your head now? Use positive imagery every time you can when you're doing some kind of an example. It will make a difference, and it makes people want to talk about the thing you're talking about, not, ooh. Same is true of furry. Good example. If I told you, if somebody asks me, what's furry all about? And I was like, well, you've probably seen a lot of bad stuff on TV, so we're not all freaks. Not all of us are into having crazy, kinky sex, and not all of us are zoophiles, and all of us don't go around pooping in litter boxes. What images did I just reference with furry, and so other people who know nothing about it? Those are now the only reference points they have, or the first reference points from what you've said. What you can say, and would be a lot more effective, would be, hey, what's furry all about? Well, you know what? Furry is actually hard to define because some of us are artists, some of us are costume performers, some of us are puppeteers, some of us are writers, some of us are musicians. Essentially, we're all artists of some form or another. But what we create is our own characters. We don't use other people's characters. We use stuff that we build ourselves, and that makes us unique. What images did I just put in your head? What did I just reference? And which one would you personally want to hear as an audience member? If you are a tabloid journalist, you want the first. Most human beings actually want to hear what you are, not what you aren't. So when you use examples, keep them positive. They make for a much better conversation. And then the last talking point that I put on here, and again, I have bad vision, I'm sorry, is to watch audience reactions while you speak. And that's why I was saying there are things that you can tell when you're losing your audience. One of them is this. This is the worst reaction that I can get. It's one of them anyways, when people start looking at the ceiling, heavy deep breathing, folding arms like you're bored or you're cold, shuffling your feet, looking down at your phone, whatnot. When I'm losing people's attention, I can tell, and I try to shift the conversation so that I can regain the attention. Watch how your audience is reacting to what you speak. Make sure that you feel like you've got that engagement. Excuse me. That's what will make your presentations really effective, because you're in tune with who you're talking to. That is actually every single bullet point that I have. We are at 32 minutes after the hour, so we have about 15 to 17 minutes. Does anybody have questions, things that are now burning in your mind? Yes, sir.
Two things. One on the hand gestures. What about the unintentional hand gestures? Like, I remember in, I think it was high school, they were talking about like the belly button surprise, the person that's up there and just constantly, it's kind of unintentional hand gestures. Like, how do you overcome that? And the best part was, I remember this specifically, the person who did that then immediately started doing that, and I'm pretty sure it was unintentional.
So it's a great question. There are some hand gestures that are bad. I would say anything involving the middle digit is probably not a good thing to be moving around a lot. But if you watch yourself, if you record your presentation or you record yourself speaking and you see something that looks odd, that's the first thing. Record yourself. You know, most of our cell phones now can record video. Just record yourself. And if you see yourself doing this all the time, or another thing that happened to me when I was in high school is I used to get dry mouth all the time. And after about every 5th or 6th word, I would cough every single time. So my speeches initially sounded like, and while we're talking about congressional representatives and the effect that they excuse me, have on their community, one of the excuse me, I didn't know I was doing it. But I didn't realize that I needed to drink some water before I started talking, or that I needed to have something to keep my throat from getting dry. If you're not aware of it, you'll never fix it. So you want to make sure that you record yourself, or try to, and look at what you're presenting. Look and see how you would react to it, and look and see what you're doing, and then adjust so that it does look a little bit more normal. The flip side of that is exaggerated reactions, exaggerated hand gestures that you're always doing for emphasis really don't work. If you're doing it all the time, it doesn't look natural. It looks like a cartoon character, and that's not what you want. And sometimes it's just better to have your hands at your side, every once in a while point, and then do nothing else. It depends on what you're talking about. Yes, sir.
Slightly related. When someone's first getting into public speaking or PR, getting a message across, streaming, any of these different formats. I mean, streaming I know is a little different because maybe you want the candid responses, but I think a great deal of the issues are related to anxiety, and you know, I've heard all kinds of crazy advice. Take a fidget with you. It's a terrible idea. Other things like that. Although my response there might have been off-putting. What do you think the best way to actually practice needing out the anxiety from the conversation would be?
It's a great question. It's different for every person, so I can't give you a hard and fast rule. I can tell you something I think works for me, and is the most effective thing for me, is preparation. When you're getting ready to talk about a subject matter, and I use furry as the example all the time because it's one of the things I have to talk about year-round. Having specific things that you talk about and specific pieces of information in your back pocket that you can pull out at a heartbeat, not literally, but just kind of weave into a conversation, will give you a level of confidence you didn't have before. I'm going to give you an example. Whenever I have to come into Pittsburgh, I'm asked the same questions by the same television station, sometimes the same reporters, over and over again because they're looking for a contemporary, current video. Sometimes they don't even realize that they've asked me the same question for 3 years in a row, and I'm not going to call them out on it. But one of the things that they always ask is, well, what do you say? How do you define furry? Who are you people? What is all this? I have a specific story that I always pull out. And because I've rehearsed it and said this thing hundreds of times, it sounds like I know what I'm talking about. And here's the story. You're asking me who furries are. To know who a furry was, or who a furry is, you need to know who furries were. We were the kid in school who craved social acceptance. We were that brainy kid that everybody wanted to cheat off of, but never got invited to parties. We were the kid at recess who was never chosen for sports, but people always wanted to use our homework. We were that person at parties that stood at the wall hoping someone would invite us out to the dance floor. We were all of those kids who craved social interaction and we didn't get it from our peers. But where we did find acceptance was the happy, smiling faces of the cartoon characters that we saw on television. That's who we were. Who are we today? We're simply people who never forgot our childhood friends. If you can relate to that, you can understand what drives a large number of furries. I will use that example over and over again. And every single time I do, reporters always go, wow, that's almost profound. I get it. It's relatable because a lot of them have gone through some of that. It's specific in that it talks specifically about what furries do and how we respond, how we react and how we respond to things. But then it touches on something that they experienced as a child and pulls it into their adult lives. We just never forgot our friends. That kind of a story, having it and being able to regurgitate it, and that's really what it is, it's a regurgitation over and over and over again, makes me able to talk about it without choking up, because I used to choke up when I talked about it. I can say it conversationally, and I don't stumble over it all the time. That gives me confidence. So if you're looking to gain confidence through any series of actions, having specific knowledge or a specific speech kind of outlined in your head that you can just pull out, catchphrases that you'll use all the time, that will give you that level of authority that maybe other people never thought you had before, because you talk with it like you know what you're talking about. You know how to speak. Sound okay? And different example, and then we'll get right over to you. Different example, whenever I'm getting ready to talk to reporters, KDKA, WPXI, WTAE, KPXI, I'm sorry, they always ask, well, why Pittsburgh? Why is Anthrocon in Pittsburgh? My answer is always, we're in Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh likes us. Did you know that last year Anthrocon deposited over $20.1 million into the local economy, and this year we're forecast to deposit $21.7 million in direct spending. That's spending that's going to the hotels, taxis, restaurants, housekeepers, all kinds of businesses in the downtown area. And that's going to happen in one weekend. Think about that. That means that over the next 5 years, Anthrocon is going to deposit over $100 million into your economy. Most reporters are like, wow, whoa. And you can actually hear that on camera. They're like, whoa, I had no idea you were that big. When you have those specific citations, just keep them in your back pocket, pull them out when you're ready. And next year, if you come back and you see me talking on television, you will see those exact same kinds of examples being pulled out with revised numbers, because Visit Pittsburgh gives them to me about a month in advance. It gives that level of authority, and it makes you feel pretty darn good when people are like, whoa, I didn't know you could do that. Yes, what was your question?
So for first-time panelists, like, are there any tips that you have if somebody's trying to break into panel hosting? I specifically would love to be able to host a panel here. I'm just working on the process.
Come here.
Physically?
Come here. Physically, come here.
Okay. I'll come up.
Come here.
All right.
Stand right here.
Yes.
You want to be a panel host? What is your name?
My name is Kage Ryoko. I am not that Kage.
Fantastic. Kageroka, where are you from?
Is it okay if I don't say? I'm just going to say I'm an East Coast furry for the
Personal,
purposes
perfect.
of this panel.
You're in the East Coast of the United States.
Yes.
Fantastic. Are there a lot of furries in your area?
Too many.
Too many. Okay. We're not going to go into a lot of details on that. But you say you want to host panels. What's a subject matter that you're really interested in?
I would like to teach people how to teach themselves art.
Art?
Try to get them self-taught skills, teach them how I've learned how to teach myself art so that they may be able to just hand out doodles to their friends.
Cool. So is it just drawing or maybe painting, sculpting, any other art forms?
It's gonna be bare bones minimum, very like basic styles of drawing. It's going to be, you know, very rudimentary, just getting the basics down, showing you like what I've found for inspiration, and then how I look at that inspiration and break it down.
Tell me, what kinds of supplies do I need? What do I need to learn these skills?
Pen and paper.
Pen and paper.
Very, very basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Pen specifically so that you don't have to erase.
Would you mind telling everybody, how long have you been doing this?
Art specifically,
Yeah.
or panel hosting?
Art.
I had it down. I have it written down. But most of my life, I was, for a period of time,
If you don't have a specific amount of time frame, what was the earliest memory that you have doodling?
I would say I doodled a little too much in middle school, high school.
Tell me about your favorite thing you've ever drawn. Actually, tell them, favorite thing you've ever drawn.
Favorite thing I've ever drawn. Oh, that's a really difficult one.
Mm-hmm.
because I'm always learning, I'm always trying to do more. I specifically have this one photo that I keep going back to. It's back when I didn't even feel that confident about my art itself, but it just inspired me to go further. Just a little critter just floating in a grassy field. So.
Can I ask you one other question?
Yeah.
When did you become the host of this panel? You're the only one on stage.
About 30 seconds ago when I saw you skating away.
It was about 3 minutes ago when you first got up.
I noticed the scoot, and then I was like, you're behind the desk now.
Yeah. The reason I did that is, when you want to start hosting things, trial by fire is really the only thing that helps you with that. You can practice a lot at
Yes.
home, but you actually have to do it. The only way I can get you to understand what you need to do is by actually putting you in the spotlight.
Yes.
And that's exactly, you were able to hold people's attention for that amount of time. Big round of applause.
I thought this was going to happen in like October, so thank you very much for this opportunity.
You're very welcome.
Hopefully back next year.
Sure.
But we'll see.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So does anybody else have a question or something you've seen and you want to know a little bit more about it? I'm still trying to be cognizant of the time. We have about 5 minutes left. Yes, sir.
I've been watching Nathan Fielder's rehearsal.
Uh-huh.
So not to that extent, but can you explain a little bit more about how you rehearse? How often do you do it? Is it daily or before the shower or something?
I really rehearse speeches as needed.
Okay.
I don't put a lot of time every single day into it because I don't have that kind of time. I have a regular job, I have a dog, I have an elderly mother I take care of, and I also help run 2 very large furry conventions. So when I know I'm going to be doing a presentation, I'll start putting the outlines together fairly early, several months in advance. Fuma can actually tell you I was working on this one about 3.5 months ago. No, it was about a month ago that I did this one. It was the other one that I did earlier. But the reason was because I encountered a panel that was just so gosh awful boring. I was like, I want people to have a resource to figure out how to make my panels better. How do I keep people's interest? How do I not bore the living daylights out of people? And I don't want anybody leaving a panel or something I host saying, my God, I wish I could get that hour back. That means I wasted your time and mine. I'd rather it be entertaining, I'd rather it be informative, and something you can take back and say, hey, I really can use this. Yes?
How do you align how much you put in the outline with how much time you have?
So that actually is something that I put on note cards, and I start writing it out. And the question was about how much time on the outline do you allot to each thing. On my note cards, I will write out what I'm gonna say. Sometimes, like when I'm doing stand-up comedy, I do it word for word. And I will time it and read the entire segment, and then time it and see if I need to trim it or whatnot, because you do have very limited times when you're doing stand-up comedy, and you have to get your timing right. But with these things, I wrote it out. I actually took 3 bullet points out because I didn't think they were germane. They seemed repetitive. So I do that, then I start speaking about it. I'll write down, okay, this took 3 minutes and 30 seconds to go over this topic. I'll do the next ones, and I'll try to figure out, is that too much time and it gets boring, or do I need to stretch it? Was it too short? Then I read it out all together on the recording, time it, and listen to it, see if it sounds okay, and then I keep adjusting. That's when I'm uncomfortable with the subject matter. It's things like furry numbers and speaking for news interviews. That I've done so many times, I don't even worry about it anymore. Yes?
Do you do like 2 minutes topic, 1 minute topic, or any longer that is interest?
It depends on the topic and your audience. Some audiences will want to hear 3 to 5 minute examples. Some only want 30 seconds. So 1 minute to 2 minutes is about right. But again, flex it depending on your audience and depending on how you're gonna present it. That's a guideline for me. Yes?
Is there a book you would recommend?
A book that I would recommend? I love Flatland by E.A. Abbott. No, I've never used a specific textbook for speech, because when I was in debate and speech classes, there was no textbook. I get trial by fire. We had to do everything ourselves, and then our speech instructors would basically tell everybody what he saw as we were speaking, and he would give us feedback, and then we'd have to come back and do it again.
So mentorship.
Mentorship, exactly. Now, the other thing that I will mention is, and this is something nobody can teach you, you have to develop it for yourself. You can do it by watching people. When you're doing relatability, sometimes an ability to make people laugh, like very quickly, is one of the most effective tools that you have because it keeps you human. So I would always recommend having a quick joke in there, and I can tell you one quick story, and then we're probably gonna have to end this, but we can speak outside if you want. I was in Orlando recently with Fuma, and we went to a comedy club, and the comedy club had their headliner cancel. And so they brought in a substitute comic from New York. And when he came in, he was going through his routine, and it was kind of and he's going through his phone while he's on stage. And he's like, do you mind if I try out some new material on you guys? And I'm like, we're like, sure. So we're eating while he's talking in the comedy club. And he's like, da, 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 da. Is anybody here trans? Fuma and I are like, and he says, I don't care if you're male. I don't care if you identify as male. I don't care if you identify as female. I don't care if you identify as, a specific religious group, ethnic group, nothing like that matters. But whatever you do, please don't identify as one of those damn cat people. And we were like, And he goes, yeah, those people that dress up in freaky costumes to have sex and poop in litter boxes. And everybody in the audience is like, huh? What are you talking about? Fuma and I are like, So he goes, okay, that joke didn't go over. So he goes through the rest of his cell phone stuff, and then he continues with his routine. At the end of the routine and the show, we were able to meet all of the people that were on stage. And I was going line by line, talking to all the comedians. The comedian before him was hilarious. He was talking about a routine where his mother, when he was little, would hit him over the head with a flour sack, so he had white hair for days. I come up after I talked to that guy, I come to this guy and I said, hey, I really enjoyed your comedy routine. And he goes, oh, really? What part? Well, I like comedy I can relate to. And he's like, well, what part do you relate to? Oh, it has something to do with one of my hobbies. Oh, what's your hobby? He's holding CDs of his comedy routines. Like, what's your hobby? I run conventions for people who identify as cats. And he looks up, what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm a furry and I help run furry conventions. And he's like, no way, you're not serious, you're not yanking my chain, are you? And I'm like, no, I really help run furry conventions. And with the CDs in hand, he goes, you don't identify as a cat, do you? I'm like, come on, dude, be serious. I've got more self-respect than that. I identify as a dog. He's like, what? And I'm like, until this summer, then I'll identify as a yellow kangaroo with spots and colored tail tips, colored ear tips. And in one motion, he puts the CDs down on the desk. He's like, I wish I didn't have to sell these CDs. I have got to talk to you. If you notice, as we're wrapping this up, we're wrapping it up on a light moment. People were laughing, enjoying themselves. Hopefully, when you leave this room, you will leave with a positive attitude, something fun, but also some information. If you want to have an effective presentation, I always recommend ending on something light. Doesn't have to be a comedy thing, but end on something light and positive. And most of the time, people will leave saying, okay, I got something out of that. That's all I've got. Like I said, we've got 10 minutes before, so we're right on time. If anybody wants to ask me anything or talk to me, I'll be right outside, but I want to make sure we have enough time for somebody coming in to be able to set up properly. So thanks, everybody.